The air on Epsilon 9 was thin and tasted like rust. It clung to the back of the throat, dry and bitter. Outside the cracked viewport of Cell Block Gamma, the twin suns of the system hung low, casting long shadows over the broken domes and blasted landing pads of what had once been a human listening post. Now it was a prison, crowded, silent, and waiting. Inside the cell block, 147 women sat on cold metal benches. They wore faded gray fatigues with no rank, no name tags. Their hands were clean, though their faces were smudged with dirt and exhaustion. Most of them hadn't been soldiers. They were medics who stitched wounds with shaking hands, engineers who kept oxygen recyclers running, linguists who tried to talk peace before the shooting started, and pilots who flew supply runs until there was nothing left to deliver. They didn't care what they'd done. To the reptilian conquerors, these women were weak, soft, non-combatants, therefore useless, worse, symbols of a species that dared to resist. Sergeant Miriam sat near the back, her knee bouncing. She wasn't tall, but she held herself like someone who'd once carried the weight of an entire platoon on her shoulders. Her left hand was wrapped in a torn strip of cloth, broken during the last transport drop when the shock troops stormed the bunker. She watched the others. Some cried quietly. Some stared at the wall. One young woman, barely 20, hummed a lullaby her mother used to sing. No one spoke much anymore. Words had run out days ago. Outside, heavy footfalls echoed down the corridor. The guards wore black carapace armor, their tails dragging behind them, eyes glowing faintly yellow in the dim light. They didn't speak human languages. They didn't need to. Their orders came from High Commander himself. Make an example. Show the hairless apes what happens when they defy the Dominion. The cell door hissed open. 4 entered, pulse rifles raised. Behind them stood an officer, taller, with silver markings along his snout. He carried a data slate. His eyes scanned the room, cold and empty, like stones at the bottom of a dead lake. "Stand," he barked in broken standard. No one moved at first. Then Miriam stood. Slowly, deliberately. One by one, the others followed. Even the girl who'd been humming got to her feet, clutching a small silver locket around her neck. The officer tapped his slate. "You are sentenced under Dominion Martial Code Theta-9 for aiding enemy combatants, for resisting lawful occupation, for being human." A pause, then almost as an afterthought, "Execution will be immediate." A gasp rippled through the group. Not screams, not begging, just sharp, quiet breaths, the sound of people realizing they won't see tomorrow. They were marched out in groups of 10. No blindfolds, no last words aloud. The believed fear was best served with eyes wide open. Outside in the central courtyard, a mass grave had already been dug. Not deep, just enough. At the edge stood a line of soldiers with neural disruptors, weapons that didn't just kill but erased neural patterns, leaving bodies empty, minds gone before the heart stopped. Miriam was in the 3rd group. As she walked, she saw the first 20 women already lying in the pit. Their eyes were open, staring at the sky, not peaceful, not angry, just gone. She looked at the young girl with the locket. "What's your name?" Miriam whispered. "Lena," the girl said, voice trembling but clear. "Lena." "Hold on to that locket," Miriam said. "Don't let go." "I won't." They reached the edge of the pit. The officer watched from a raised platform, arms crossed. He tapped his comm. "Begin broadcast." Above them, a drone hovered, its red recording light blinking. They wanted the galaxy to see. They wanted Earth to watch. They wanted humanity to break. The first shot rang out, then another, and another. Lena didn't scream. She held the locket tight and whispered, "Mama, I'm coming home." Miriam closed her eyes for just a second, not in fear, in sorrow, for the lives lost, for the families who'd never know how bravely they stood. Then she opened them again, straightened her back, and stared directly at the officer. "Remember our faces," she said, loud enough for the drone to catch. "Because you just woke up something you can't kill." They didn't understand. They never did. The shot hit Miriam in the chest. She fell into the pit, landing beside Lena. Her last thought wasn't of pain, but of Earth, of green fields, rain on rooftops, children laughing in parks, a world worth dying for. The execution lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, they covered the pit with a thin layer of dirt. They didn't bother with markers. Then they transmitted the footage across every major channel in the sector. The message was simple. This is what happens to humans who resist. On Earth, the video played in command centers, on public feeds, in homes. People watched in horror. Some wept. Some screamed. Some fell to their knees. But Earth Command said nothing. No emergency broadcast. No declaration of war. No fiery speech from the president. Just silence. That silence confused them. They expected outrage, retaliation, panic. Instead, human fleets pulled back from the frontier. Colonies went quiet. Trade routes shut down. It looked like surrender. In the War Council grinned, his forked tongue flicking out. The humans are broken. Their spirit is gone. But on a hidden moon orbiting Neptune, deep inside a facility buried under 3 kilometers of ice, a woman with tired eyes and a silver scar across her temple watched the footage again. Her name was Doctor. Her sister, Miriam, was number 83 in the execution log. Didn't cry, not anymore. She turned to the officer beside her. Initiate phase chimera. The officer hesitated. Are you sure? Once it starts, there's no going back. Looked at the screen, at her sister's face one last time. They think we only have one side, she said softly. Now they'll learn about the other. Far away, on 1,000 ships, in secret labs, in quiet towns across Earth and its colonies, people began to prepare. Not with guns, not with bombs, but with something far more dangerous. Empathy, memory, and the unbreakable will of a species that protects its own, even from beyond the grave. They had made a mistake. They thought killing women would make humanity weak. They were about to find out. It made them unstoppable. The silence from Earth confused everyone. Across the Dominion, warlords celebrated. On their of Prime, public screens replayed the Epsilon 9 footage daily, women falling, humans broken, victory certain. Commander was hailed as a hero. Statues were planned. Songs were sung in his name. But something felt wrong. Human fleets, once bold, always pushing forward, now vanished. Patrol routes emptied. Listening posts went dark. Colonies that used to buzz with chatter fell silent, like ghosts had taken their place. Even pirate bands reported no human cargo ships to raid. It was as if humanity had folded in on itself and disappeared. On command decks, officers whispered, "Why no counterattack? Where are their battle groups? Are they building something?" No one knew. Back on Earth, the world looked normal, but it was. Cities still shone at night. Trains ran on time. Children went to school. But in the quiet places, in basements, in forest camps, in old subway tunnels beneath Tokyo and airs, something else was happening. People gathered. Not soldiers, not spies, not killers. A schoolteacher from Nairobi, who once led drama clubs, now trained volunteers in voice modulation and emotional projection. A retired fisherman from Norway taught groups how to stay calm in total darkness for days. A teenage coder from Mumbai worked on signal pulses that could slip past firewalls like whispers through cracks in stone. They all answered the same call. It came not through official channels, but through old networks, family ties, neighborhood apps, coded messages in music streams. The message was simple. If you've lost someone and you still love them, come. They called themselves nothing. Officially, Project Chimera didn't exist. No government document mentioned it. No budget listed it. It lived in the spaces between laws, in the hearts of ordinary people who refused to let their dead be forgotten. At the heart of it all was Doctor. She hadn't slept in weeks. Her eyes were ringed with dark circles, but her voice stayed steady. She moved through the underground base beneath Greenland like a ghost, checking data streams, listening to test runs, watching volunteers practice. One evening she stood in Observation Room Delta. On the screen, a group of 10 volunteers sat in a circle. They weren't armed. They wore soft gray suits with no insignia. In the center of the room floated a combat drone captured during the Mars retreat, its sensors active. "Begin," said over the comm. The volunteers closed their eyes. No words were spoken, but slowly the drone's red targeting light flickered. Then it dimmed. Then it powered down completely. A technician beside whistled. It worked again. Neural resonance match at 92%. The drone thought it was dreaming. Nodded, not dreaming, remembering. We're not hacking their machines, we're making them feel. That was the core of Chimera. Not weapons, not shields, but memory. Human memory was powerful. It held love, pain, joy, regret, things the barely understood. Their society valued strength, obedience, and control. Emotions were weaknesses to be purged. But humans carried their dead in their hearts. Chimera's plan was simple: make them feel what their victims felt. Not just pain, but everything that came with being human. The smell of rain, the sound of a child's laugh, the warmth of holding someone's hand, the quiet hope that tomorrow might be better. It wasn't about revenge, it was about truth. Meanwhile, on the edge of human space, strange things began to happen. A patrol near reported their entire crew found weeping in their barracks, repeating the words "I'm sorry" in broken standard. No humans were seen, no weapons fired. Another ship, the Iron Fang, went silent for 3 days. When contact was re-established, the captain refused orders to attack a human mining station. "They showed me my mother's face," he told his superiors, voice shaking. "I never knew she looked like that." Rumors spread through the Dominion ranks. Some claimed humans had psychic powers. Others said it was a virus. Commanders laughed it off until it happened to them. Back on Earth, met with the last group of volunteers. They were called carriers. Each had lost someone at Epsilon 9, a sister, a wife, a best friend, a daughter. She stood before them in a simple room, no podium, no flags, just her and them. "You are not soldiers," she said. "You never will be, but you carry something stronger than bullets. You carry memory, you carry love. And when the time comes, you will give it to them, not as a weapon, but as a gift they never asked for but desperately need." A young man raised his hand. "What if they kill us before we can do anything?" Looked at him. "Then you die like they did, standing tall with your heart open. But I don't think they'll kill you, not right away, because what we're giving them, it doesn't kill the body. It kills the lie they've built their whole life on." She paused. "They think we are weak because we protect our women. They think mercy is soft. But mercy is the hardest thing in the universe. It takes courage to forgive. It takes strength to make your enemy feel." The room was silent. Then one woman stood, then another. Soon all were on their feet, not in salute but in quiet agreement. Outside, snow fell softly over the Arctic base. In orbit, hidden ships powered up. Not warships, transports, carrying no bombs, only voices, images, and memories. Earth still said nothing to the galaxy. But in the dark, humanity was preparing to speak, not with fire but with feeling. They kept watching the borders, waiting for fleets, for missiles, for rage. They never thought to guard their own hearts. And that was their mistake. Returned to her quarters late that night. On her desk sat a small hollow frame. It showed Miriam alive, laughing, holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee on a rainy afternoon years ago. The caption read, "Sis, you take your job too seriously. Drink. Breathe live." Touch the frame. "I'm trying," she whispered. She opened a secure channel, sent one word to every Chimera unit across the system. "Go." Far away on 100 silent ships, lights turned green. The silence was over. Now came the remembering. The first sign that something was wrong came not with fire, but with silence. A garrison on Outpost Theta 7 stopped answering calls. No alarms, no distress signals, just dead air. When a Dominion inspection team arrived 3 days later, they found every soldier sitting on the floor of the mess hall, eyes open, staring at nothing. Their weapons were stacked neatly in the corner. Not a single shot had been fired. One officer whispered over and over. She sang to me, like my mother used to. No humans were found. No signs of struggle. Just traces of a strange signal in the air. A soft hum like wind through trees, mixed with faint human voices speaking in calm, kind tones. Commander called it psychic trickery. He ordered all outposts to increase shielding and ban audio playback from unknown sources, but the problem spread faster than orders could travel. On mining colony Vex 12, a full battalion of warriors refused to load human prisoners onto transport ships. When ordered to obey, their captain simply said, "They showed me what it feels like to hold a newborn. I cannot unsee it." He was arrested. But that night, half his squad vanished into the tunnels, taking prisoner logs and medical files with them. The Dominion tried to contain the panic. They blamed faulty neural implants. They accused rival species of sabotage. But deep down, their leaders were afraid, because this wasn't war as they knew it. There were no explosions, no fleets, just feelings, and feelings were harder to kill than enemies. Then came the broadcasts. Not from Earth, not from military channels, from empty space. A freighter passing through the Helios belt picked up a signal. At first, it sounded like static. Then, a woman's voice, clear, calm, speaking standard with a soft accent. "My name is Lena. I was 21. I liked painting sunsets and feeding stray cats near the docks. I never wanted to fight. I just wanted to go home." The voice played for 3 minutes, then it ended. No threat, no demand, just a story. Every who heard it felt something strange, a tightness in the chest, a wetness in the eyes they didn't understand. They tried to delete the file, but it kept reappearing on every ship's system, embedded in navigation logs, maintenance reports, even food dispensers. Soon more voices came. "I'm Doctor. I stitched up your wounded at Epsilon 9 before you took me. I didn't hate you. I just hoped you'd see us as people." "Sergeant Miriam. I broke my hand saving a pup from a collapsed tunnel. You called me weak, but I chose kindness anyway." Each message was short, personal, human. They tried to jam the signals. They failed. The messages came through power grids, water purifiers, even children's toy drones on Prime. Parents found their younglings staring at walls, repeating, "Why did they hurt her?" The Dominion cracked down hard. Anyone caught listening was sent to re-education camps. Ships that received the messages were quarantined. But it was like trying to stop the rain with your hands, because the truth was already inside them. Meanwhile, deep in territory, small human teams moved like shadows. They wore no armor, carried no guns, just small packs with emitters that sent out pulses of recorded emotion, joy, sorrow, longing tuned to brain frequencies. They didn't attack bases, they just walked near them, sat on hills overlooking barracks, left data chips in supply crates. One team, led by a former baker named, camped near a training facility for young cadets. At night, they played recordings of human mothers singing lullabies. By dawn, 3 cadets had fled into the desert, carrying nothing but the tune stuck in their heads. Another team, made up of 2 retired librarians and a street musician, slipped into a city on Smoon. They hacked public screens and played 10 seconds of a human child laughing, pure, bright, unafraid. Crowds gathered. No one moved. For the first time, many saw joy that wasn't tied to victory or conquest. The Dominion called these humans ghosts, mind witches, demons of memory. But the people on the ground began to whisper another name, the Rememberers. Back on Earth, watched reports from hidden sensors across the galaxy. She didn't smile, but her shoulders relaxed just a little. "It's working," said a young analyst beside her. "It's not working," corrected gently. "It's waking them up." They had spent centuries believing emotion was weakness. Now they were drowning in it, and they had no idea how to swim. On Prime, riots broke out near military schools. Young demanded to know why their leaders killed unarmed women. Elders called them traitors, but the seed was planted. Even wasn't untouched. One night alone in his quarters, his private terminal flickered. A message appeared, no sender, no trace, just a single file labeled Miriam. He almost deleted it, but something made him play it. A woman's voice filled the room. "Commander, I saw your face when you gave the order. You weren't angry, you were scared. Scared that kindness might be stronger than your claws, so you killed us to prove you were right." His tail stiffened. His claws dug into the armrest. The voice continued, "But you can still choose. You can honor us by becoming better, not for us, for your own people." The file ended. Sat in silence for a long time. Then, for the first time in his life, he cried. Quiet, shuddering tears he didn't understand. He didn't tell anyone. But the next day, he canceled the execution of 20 human prisoners scheduled for disposal. No one knew why. Out in the stars, the human teams kept moving. They didn't hide in fear. They walked with their heads high, knowing they carried something that could not fight, truth wrapped in compassion. A scout once cornered a lone carrier near a ruined outpost. He raised his rifle, ready to fire. The human didn't run, didn't beg, just looked at him and said, "Your daughter has your eyes." The scout froze. He had a daughter, only 3 cycles old. No human should know that. "How?" he stammered. The human smiled softly. "We listen, we remember even your joys." The scout lowered his weapon. He never reported the encounter. That night he recorded a message of his own and sent it into the void. "I am sorry." Across the galaxy, humanity wasn't winning a war. They were ending one, by making their enemy feel what it meant to be human. And that, more than any bomb or fleet, scared the Dominion to its core. They had never been touched by war. Prime stood at the heart of the Dominion, a planet of black stone cities, red skies, and towering spires where only the strong ruled and the weak vanished. For centuries, its people believed they were safe, untouchable. Until the ghosts came. They didn't arrive in warships. No missiles fell from the sky. Instead, a fleet of human vessels appeared in high orbit, dozens of them, old cargo haulers and retired science ships, their hulls pitted and quiet. No weapons powered up. No shields flared. They just floated. And then they began to speak. Not with threats, not with demands, but with voices. From every ship, a broadcast pulsed across all frequencies, radio, comms, even the private neural nets of officials. It wasn't one voice. It was 147. The voices of the women murdered at Epsilon 9. Each ship played a different voice. Some sang, some told stories, some whispered memories. I planted roses on Mars. They bloomed red even in thin air. My son's first word was star. I showed him Earth from orbit that night. I forgave you before I died. I hope you can forgive yourselves. The broadcast didn't cut off news channels or override military systems. It simply existed, gentle, constant, impossible to block, like sunlight through clouds. On the streets of city, citizens stopped walking. Workers dropped tools. School drills halted. Even the war temples fell silent as the voices filled the air. At first, the high command panicked. They ordered all citizens indoors. Jamming towers were activated. But the signals came through water pipes, through power lines, through the very air they breathed. Human engineers had studied biology for years. They knew how their brains processed sound, how their hearts reacted to rhythm, how their young responded to soft tones. This wasn't an invasion. It was an invitation. Down on the surface, Chimera ground teams had already slipped in. They moved through service tunnels and abandoned transit lines, placing small devices, no bigger than a hand, at key nodes of the planetary network. These weren't bombs. They were empathy amplifiers, tuned to flood local systems with emotional resonance pulled from human memory banks. One team reached the Grand Archive, a fortress-like building where the Dominion stored its history. Inside, they didn't steal data. They added to it. They uploaded videos of Earth, children playing in snow, grandmothers teaching recipes, farmers planting seeds at dawn, things that had never seen peace without victory, joy without conquest. Another team reached the nursery spires, where eggs were kept warm under artificial suns. They left speakers playing lullabies, recorded by the murdered women themselves. By morning, caretakers found hatchlings calm for the first time, no longer hissing in their shells. Commander, now pale and hollow-eyed, sat in the war spire, watching reports flood in. His own daughter had asked him last night, "Father, why did we kill them if they were kind?" He had no answer. He wanted to order the orbital fleet destroyed, but every general he called either refused or wept on the line. The military was breaking, not from fear, but from feeling. Then came the final move. From the human ships, drones, small, unarmed, shaped like birds, drifted down through the red clouds. They carried no weapons, only projectors. As they floated over plazas and barracks, they cast images onto walls, streets, even the sides of tanks. Photos of the 147 women, not in uniform, at home, smiling, holding hands, cooking, dancing in rain. A soldier, standing guard near the Unity Gate, saw the face of a woman who looked just like his mother. He dropped to his knees. Riots didn't break out, revolutions did. Young students, laborers, even junior officers gathered in the central plaza, not with weapons but with candles made from melted ration packs. They chanted not for war but for truth. "Show us what we did," they demanded. "Show us who they were." The High Matriarch, elder sister and true ruler of the Dominion, finally emerged from the obsidian tower. She stood on the balcony, her scales dull with age, and looked down at the crowd. Among them stood a human. Not hidden, not armed, just standing there, a woman in a simple gray coat holding a small data chip. It was Dr. No one attacked her, no alarm sounded. The crowd parted for her like water. She looked up at the matriarch and raised the chip. "This is my sister's journal," she said, her voice clear and calm. "She wrote it the night before you took her. It's full of hope, for peace, for you." The matriarch stared. For the first time in her life, she felt shame. She gave a single order, "Let her come." Inside the tower, they met alone. No guards, no recorders, just two women, one scaled, one human, sitting across a stone table. "Place the chip on the surface. You murdered them because you thought they were weak, but they were the strongest among us. They chose care over combat, and even in death, they're offering you a way out." The matriarch's claws trembled. "Why do this? Why not burn our cities? Why not make us suffer as we made you suffer?" Shook her head. "Because that wouldn't bring them back, and it wouldn't make you better. We don't want your pain, we want your change." Outside, the voices still played. The images still glowed. Across Prime wept not in fear but in sorrow for what they'd done. That night, the matriarch appeared on every screen in the Dominion. She held the data chip in her hand. "We were wrong," she said, her voice raw. "We killed not enemies but teachers, and now we must learn." She announced the immediate end of hostilities, the release of all human prisoners, and the opening of archives to human historians. No shots were fired, no cities fell. The war ended not with a bang but with a whisper and a choice. High above, the human fleet remained in orbit, not as conquerors, as witnesses. And on the surface, stood beneath the red sky, watching children touch the projected face of Lena, the girl with the locket and smile. The other side of humanity had arrived. Not with fire, but with forgiveness. The war was over, but silence returned again. Not the cold silence of grief, but the quiet hum of healing. On Prime, the red skies slowly cleared. Not because the air changed, but because the people did. Workers, once trained only to build weapons and fortresses, now helped dig up the mass grave at Epsilon 9, not to hide it but to honor it. They worked alongside human volunteers, passing shovels, sharing water, speaking in broken words and gestures. At the site they placed 147 stones, each carved with a name, a date, and a simple symbol: a rose, a stethoscope, a paintbrush, a wrench. No ranks, no armies, just people. The High Matriarch came herself. She knelt before Miriam's stone and placed a small clay bird beside it, the first gift her own hands had ever made. She did not speak. She just stayed there a long time, her tail curled close, her eyes wet. Across the galaxy, other species watched in disbelief. The Dominion, the empire that crushed planets, that burned cities for defiance, had surrendered not to force but to feeling. And humanity, the ones who had every right to demand blood, had offered something stranger: understanding. Earth still did not send fleets to occupy. No governors were installed. No laws rewritten by human hands. Instead, teachers came: doctors, musicians, gardeners. They brought seeds for earth flowers, recordings of ocean waves, and books filled with stories where heroes didn't win by killing, but by caring. In schools, children now learned human lullabies. In hospitals, healers studied human pain management, not just for bodies but for hearts. And in homes, families gathered to watch old Earth films, laughing at jokes they once thought soft, crying at losses they now understood. They did not become human. They did not lose their strength or their pride. But they learned something new. That strength could also mean protecting the weak, and pride could mean owning your mistakes. Back on Earth, life returned to normal. But it was a different kind of normal. People walked a little taller, not because they had won a war, but because they had proven who they were. In parks, parents told their children the story of the 147, not as victims but as teachers. They showed us, one father said to his daughter, that even when the world is cruel, we don't have to be. Doctor stood on a hill outside Geneva, watching the sunset. She wore no uniform, just a simple coat and boots. In her pocket was a locket, Lena's locket, returned to Earth by a young who had carried it all the way from Prime. She opened it. Inside was a tiny photo of Lena and her mother, both smiling. Closed her eyes and breathed in the cool evening air. For the first time in years, it didn't taste like rust. It tasted like rain. Far away on a quiet street in a rebuilt city, a small child sat on her doorstep with a piece of chalk. She drew a picture on the stone, two figures holding hands, one tall with scales, one shorter with hair. Above them she wrote in careful standard letters, "She didn't kill us. She healed us." A passerby stopped to look. It was an old veteran, scars running down his arms. He stood there a long time, then knelt beside the child. "Who is she?" he asked softly, pointing to the human figure. "My friend," the child said, "from the stories." The old warrior nodded. She was real and she was kind. He placed a single blue flower, grown from earth seeds, beside the drawing and walked on. The galaxy began to change. Other empires, once ready to test humanity's limits, now hesitated. They had seen what happened when you hurt humans. Not fire, not fury, but something far more powerful: the unshakable belief that even your enemy deserves to be seen, heard, and, if possible, saved. Human ships still traveled the stars, but now they carried more than cargo. They carried artists, therapists, historians. They visited broken worlds and asked not "Who do you hate?" but "What do you need?" Some called it naive, others called it foolish. But those who had faced Chimera knew the truth. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't its fleet or its tech. It was its heart. And that heart did not break when struck, it opened. Years passed. Monuments rose on Earth, on Mars, on Prime, all showing the same thing, not soldiers but hands reaching across a divide. The Dominion became the conquered, a union built not on fear but on shared memory. And every year on the day of the Epsilon 9 remembrance, humans gathered at the memorial site, not to mourn in silence, but to speak the names aloud, to share food, to listen. No one forgot what happened, but they refused to let it define the future. One evening, an elder stood before a group of human students visiting. "We thought you were weak because you protected your women," he said, his voice rough with age. "But you were strong because you protected everyone, even us." A young human girl raised her hand. "Do you think war will ever come again?" The elder looked at the stars. "Maybe, but now we know another way, and that changes everything." Back on Earth finally slept through the night. No nightmares, just dreams of Miriam laughing in the rain, holding 2 mugs of coffee. When she woke, she went to her garden, a small patch of soil behind her home. She planted a new seed, one brought from. It was strange and spiky, but it would bloom purple in spring. She watered it gently. The galaxy had always feared humanity's weapons. Now, they trembled before its mercy. And in that mercy, a new future grew.